Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. I've heard a lot about the amazing work that Chazaq does, and I'm very honored to have the opportunity to finally be a part of it. And as was just mentioned, we're in the month of Adar, which is a month of Simcha, and there's really no greater Simcha in the world than the opportunity to study Torah. What I'd like to discuss tonight and talk about tonight is what it means to really fall in love with Torah. You know, sometimes we spend our life, it's a little challenging, everyone, it's going to get a good workout tonight. Sometimes we spend a lot of time doing Torah and doing mitzvos, and if we do Torah and mitzvos for any reason, that's a good thing. But I want to try, in the spirit of the month of Adar, and we'll talk about why it's unique to the month of Adar, to try to reconnect to Torah in a deeper way, in a more meaningful way. To do mitzvos not only because we have to, but because we want to. So let's jump in a few parshios ago. In Parshas Mishpatim, in source number 1, I hope everyone has the sources. They're optional. No obligation to follow in the sources. If you'd like the sources, you're welcome to use them. It's source number 1, a pasuk that we're all familiar with. Now, sometimes from one year to the next, we forget that this pasuk actually appears in Parshas Mishpatim as opposed to Parshas Yisro, because chronologically we're used to thinking of it in terms of something that came before the Jewish people came to Kabbalah Satorah. And that is what the pasuk tells us in source number 1. V'yikach sefer abris v'yikra ba'aznei ha'am v'yomru kol asher diber Hashem nasa v'nishma. We know that one of the greatest statements, arguably the greatest statement the Jewish people ever said, was nasa v'nishma. That they expressed a willingness to do whatever it is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was going to ask for them before they even knew what it was. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was going around the world and Hashem's trying to find someone who's interested in this Torah, and no one seems to be interested. Until finally HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes to the Jewish people and says, would you be interested in my Torah? And they say, Na'aseh v'nishma, we'll take the Torah before we even know what it is. You don't even need to present it to us. We're not interested in finding out the details of the mitzvos. We don't even need to hear the big picture. Na'aseh v'nishma. This pasuk appears again at the end of Parshas Mishpatim. Now, there's a big discussion in the Rishonim when exactly this pasuk was said. Was this in fact said prior to Kabbalah Satorah? Was it said after Kabbalah Satorah, as it seems to appear, if I were to read the Torah simply, Parshas Yisro, followed by Parshas Mishpatim? But if you look at the Gemara in source number 2, the Gemara seems to understand, and certainly Rishon understood it this way, that this pasuk was said prior to Kabbalah Satorah. Because what happened at Kabbalah Satorah? What happened when the Jews actually stood at the mountain? Vayizyatzu b'tachtis Adar, source number 2, says the pasuk in Yisro, in Parak Yutes, the Jews stood at the foot of the mountain. But Chazal weren't satisfied with the Jewish people standing at the foot of the mountain. Chazal go one step further. Amar Rav Avdimi bar Chama bar Chasa, Melami shekofa HaKadosh Baruch Hu aleim as a har kigigis. HaKadosh Baruch Hu lifted the mountain, suspended it over their heads, and threatened the Jewish people to accept the Torah. Amar Lahem, Hashem said to the Jewish people, Imatem mekabel es Torah, if you're willing to accept my Torah, then mutav, then everything's good. Hashem will put down the mountain, and the Jewish people will be able to continue in a beautiful relationship with Kadosh Baruch Hu. Ve'im lav, but if you refuse to accept my Torah, sham tehei kfuraschem, that'll be the end of the Jewish people. There you shall be buried. Hashem threatened us, so to speak, into accepting the Torah. Now, what's so strange about this midrashic explanation of the Gemara? They stood at the foot of the mountain. Says the Gemara, no, it means they stood under the mountain. Hashem held the mountain over their head and threatened them into accepting the Torah. What's so puzzling about this Gemara? So Tosfos, right there on the side of the page, Shabbos Pei Ches Amud Aleph, in source number 3, says, didn't the Jewish people already say they want the Torah? Didn't the Jewish people say Na'aseh v'nishma? Isn't it true the Jews said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu before they were even told what the Torah is, we're excited about it, we're enthusiastic about it, we're prepared to keep it at all costs? And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu afterwards threatens us to take the Torah? We had signed up for it already. Tosfos writes in source number 3, Kaf aleim har kigigis, v'af al pi shekvar ekdimu nasa l'nishma. Tosfos is bothered, the rhetorical question, didn't the Jewish people already say nasa v'nishma? Didn't they say we'll do it wholeheartedly before we even know what it is? A simple mashal. Imagine, you go to your neighbor's home. It's a snowy day, it's been a light winter. But imagine it's a snowy day, and you're outside with your shovel, and your neighbor has a snowblower. You figure, instead of breaking your back shoveling snow, I'll go to my neighbor, he's a good friend of mine, maybe he'll lend me a snowblower. So I go over to my neighbor, I knock on the door, I see his driveway's been cleaned for hours and I'm just getting started. I said, would it be possible to borrow your snowblower? So he says, I would be thrilled. It would be an honor, I'm happy. And then you pull out a gun and say, if you don't give me your whoa, I already said yes. I already agreed. So Hashem comes to Klal Yisrael and says, are you interested in my Torah? Not of an Ishma, 100%. 100% committed. Next thing you know, Hashem's threatening us into accepting His Torah. So say the Balei Tosfos, what was the threat? How did that come to be? Explains Tosfos in source number 3 where it's bolded. Shema yuchozrim kishayiru ha'esh hagadola shiyatzas nishmasim. When the Jews originally signed up to accept the Torah, so they had a certain image of what it was going to be like, what it would mean to come to the mountain, what it would mean to hear God speak, what it would mean to receive the Torah. They show up at the mountain, and the Kadosh Baruch Hu starts to speak. And there's lightning, and there's thunder, and there's shofar, and there's darkness, and there's bright lights, and it's in a very intense scene. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, every time He speaks, Yatzas and Ishmasam, their souls, like the Gemara says, are flying out of their body. Literally. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to do Tchias HaMeisim between each of the Aseres HaDibros in order to bring the Jewish people back. And at that point, the Jewish people said, well, this is too much. We didn't sign up for this. We signed up for a Torah, Derachel Darchei Noam, a Torah that's pleasant, that's reasonable. This is too intense for us. And at that point, after having said Nasav and Ishma, assuming the Torah was going to be a certain way, now all of a sudden they were overwhelmed. And they decided to sneak away from the mountain. And it was at that moment Hashem says to them, you're not going anywhere. Kaf aleim har ki gigis. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you're here to stay. And it was at that point Hashem forced them and pressured them to accept the remainder of the Torah. That's how the Balei Tosfos understand this question. Already Chazal in the Medrash Tanchuma offered a different answer. When it comes to Torah, there are parts of Torah that are easy to learn, easy to understand, not overly technical, and there are parts of Torah that are very, very difficult to understand. And it takes tremendous effort for a person to learn. Says the Medrash Tanchuma in Parshas Noach, in source number 4, V'lo kiblu Yisrael etz Torah shekaf aleim HaKadosh Baruch Hu zahar ki gigis. The Jewish people did not accept the Torah until Hashem threatened them into it. So says the Medrash, but I thought the Jewish people wanted the Torah. Why did Hashem have to pressure them into accepting the Torah? V'im tomar, and if you'll say, Al Torah shebechsav kaf aleim zahar ki gigis, maybe Hashem had to threaten us into accepting the Torah shebechsav. Says the Medrash, not at all. When Hashem offered them the Torah Shebichsav. Let's think about Torah Shebichsav for a moment. What is Torah Shebichsav? It's a tiny little book. You could print it the size of this Ezra Torah Luach. You can carry the entire Torah Shebichsav in your pocket. It's a very small book. 5,845 sentences, 5,845 psukim. It's a lot of stories. What does it mean to keep Shabbos according to Torah Shebichsav? What does Torah Shebichsav ask of us? Lo suvaru eish b'moshe Roseichem b'yom HaShabbos. Don't light a fire on Shabbos. Okay. It's a lot easier than all the Mishnah Bruras and Shmir Shabbos Kehilchasa and so many other Svarim. Rabbi Riviet's 4-volume work on Hilchos Shabbos. So keeping the Torah Shebichsav is not so scary. It's not so threatening. So the Jewish people thought they were signing up, an exciting storybook, a couple of laws, not too complicated, not too detailed. All of a sudden they come to the mountain, and Hashem says, surprise, I have something else to give you. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu lifts up the mountain, reaches under the mountain, and pulls out a beautiful leather-bound set of Shas. 2,711 pages of impossibly difficult legal terminology. To understand one page of it can take a lifetime. And yet HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, here, it's a package deal. Torah Shebichsav comes with Torah Sheba'al Peh. And if that's not enough, right, you've just won instead of Shulchan Aruch. 4 Chalakim of Shulchan Aruch, with all the details and all the minutiae of halacha. And it was at that point the Jewish people said, whoa, we didn't sign up for this. Says the Medrash Tanchuma in source number 4 where it's bolded in the middle of the paragraph. Ela Amar Lahen al Torah Sheba'al Peh. What were they forced into accepting? Torah Sheba'al Peh. Sheyesh ba dikduke mitzvos kalos v'chamuros. Torah Sheba'al Peh is made up of the finest details. Some things are easy, some things are very difficult. V'aza kamaves. Listen to the language of Chazaq. These are our great sages speaking. Chazal say Torah Sheba'al Peh can be as painful as death itself. Aza kamaves. V'kasha k'sha'ol kinasa. It can be as difficult as the grave itself. A painful experience. Because Torah Sheba'al Peh has something to say about everything. Torah Sheba'al Peh tells you how to tie your shoes in the morning. Torah Sheba'al Peh tells you how to take a shower. Torah Sheba'al Peh controls every single detail of your life. And therefore Klal Yisrael said, this is too much for us. We can't handle this. And it was at that point, Kaf Aleim Har Kigigis. Even though they said Nasav and Ishma, they showed a basic desire to accept Torah Shebachsat, but Torah Shebal Peh was far too much. Lefisha ein lo merosa ela misha oev HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'chol libo u'b'chol nafsho u'b'chol ma'odo. To sign up for Torah Shebal Peh, you have to be wildly in love with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with all your heart and all your soul and all of your faculties, all of your money. To invest in Torah Shebal Peh, to invest in Torah Shebal Peh is a tremendous, tremendous investment. And the Jews thought they weren't ready for it. And as they tried to sneak away from the mountain, HaKadosh Baruch Hu held the mountain over their head and said, you're not going anywhere. So these are the two classic explanations that are offered. The Tosfos on the side of the page of Masechah Shabbos, and the Medrash Tanchuma and Parshas Noach. All of this changed on Purim. Kaf Aleim Har Kigigis, that coercion, that pressure to accept the Torah, entirely changed on Purim. What do I mean by that? The Gemara in Shabbos goes on in source number 5. Because the Gemara tells us what would happen if a person comes to the Olam Emes. You come to the world of truth after 120 years. And you're sitting down with the HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Hashem says, come, let's see how you did on your life. And Hashem takes out the Shulchan Aruch and he opens up to the first page. Let's see if you're Makayim all the mitzvahs of the Torah. Let's see how you did. And Hashem opens up the Shulchan Aruch, and I'm reminded, the great Mashgiach, Rav Elya Lopian. One time, Rav Shalom Shvadron, the great Maggid of Yerushalayim, saw him one morning. He looked exhausted, particularly exhausted that morning. So Shalom goes over to him and he says, Rav Elya, what's going on? You seem very, very tired. So he says, yeah, Rav Shalom, I got up this morning about 3:30, 4 o'clock. He says, so early? Yeshiva minions at 7 a.m.? What were you doing out of bed at 3 o'clock? So he says, one of the first halach in Shulchan Aruch is Yisgaber Ka'ari La'amod Baboker. A person should jump up like a lion to greet a Kadosh Baruch Hu in the morning. So he says, it just so happened this morning, 3:30, 3:45, I opened my eyes, and I was up. So I figured, the halacha is, when you wake up, you got to jump out of bed. I knew I still had a couple hours until the yeshiva minyan, but I wanted to be Makayim that halacha. And Rav Elya Lopian said, could you imagine, after 120 years, I get to the Olam Emes, and Hashem pulls out, the entire Shulchan Aruch and puts it down on the table, so to speak. And Hashem says, come, let's begin your examination. Hashem opens the cover, cracks it open. The first page, the first halach, Hashem says, did you get out of bed like a lion? So says Rav Elya Lopian, do you think I want to get out on the first question? It's a big test. I think I want to get out on the first question. Right? So a person has to have a certain enthusiasm. So a person comes to the Olam Emes, you sit down with Hashem, and Hashem says, come, let's take a bechina. And you didn't do so well. You aren't the best Jew you could be. So what excuse do we have? We turn to God, and we say, Ribono Shel Olam, I told you at our Sinai I wasn't cut out for this. I told you long ago I can't handle this. You pressured me into this. Says the Gemara, until the time of Purim, the Jewish people in fact had that excuse. It was a legitimate excuse to turn to a Kadosh Baruch Hu and say, I never wanted this. You pressured me into this. Says the Gemara in source number 5. Amar of Acha bar Yaakov, Mikan Moda Rabalo Raisa. From the fact that we were forced into it, Mikan, from here, is a Moda Rabba, a tremendous excuse, Le'o Raisa, for Torah. We can excuse ourselves for a poor performance in Torah. Amar Rava, don't get too excited, because all of that changed on Purim. Says Rava, Afal Piche. Until the story of Purim, the Jews were still operating under coercion. Once Purim came, Afal Piche and Hadar Kiblua B'Yemei Achashverosh. In the time of Achashverosh, the Jewish people re-accepted the Torah. D'chsiv Kimu v'Kiblu HaYehudim. Says the Gemara, Kimu Masha Kiblu Kvar. They were Makayim, they really accepted that which they had previously accepted. At our Sinai, they were forced into it. But on Purim, Kimu Masha Kiblu Kvar. They really accepted it. Rashi comments on the Gemara, you don't have it on the page in front of you. Rashi says, Me'ahavas hanes. They were so thankful to Hashem. They felt so beloved by Hashem that they were saved from that madman Haman. That it could have been, Rachmana litzlan, a Holocaust. And not a single Jew lost his life, her life. Right? They were so thankful to Hashem, they said, we want to re-accept the Torah, not out of coercion, but out of love. And from that point forward, the Jewish people are expected to find that inner strength to be able to keep all of Torah and mitzvahs. That's what changed on Purim. Now I want to just mention, parenthetically, okay, we'll just pause this part of the shiur for a moment. But since we read this Medrash Tanchuma, which spoke so critically of the Torah Sheba'al Peh experience, the painful experience of learning Gemara, I want to just show you a little bit, it would only be fair to show you a little bit of the sweetness of Gemara. And now a person who is willing to work hard, and is willing to look carefully, despite, again, the nitty-gritty details of a couple of lines of Gemara, but if you look carefully, you find the sweetest things in the world. I want to just give you one example, again, in the spirit of the sweetness of Torah. Dafka from an example that emerges from the Gemara. Okay, but really just parenthetically. But it's worth seeing. It's an amazing insight from the Vilna Gaon. The Gemara says in Maseches Megillah, in source number 6, the Gemara is discussing how do we know that Esther, Megillah's Esther, was written with Ruach HaKodesh? How do you know it's not just a history book? The truth is, you get to the end of the Megillah and it says, if you want the history, so go look in the secular history books. That's how the Megillah ends. Clearly indicating that this is not a secular history book. But I don't know, you read through the Megillah, Hashem's name doesn't even appear in the text. How do I know that this is part of Kisvei HaKodesh? How do I know it's a divinely inspired work? So the Gemara gives many explanations. Things that are found in Megillah's Esther that we could only have known if we had Ruach HaKodesh. For example, says the Gemara in source number 6, Rebbe Eliezer Omer, Esther Beruach HaKodesh Nemra. How do you know Megillah's Esther was divinely transmitted? Ruach HaKodesh. Shenemar Vayomer Haman Bilibo. Haman said in his heart. How are we supposed to know what Haman said in his heart? How can we possibly tell the reader of Megillah's Esther what Haman was thinking, what Haman was feeling? The only way we can know such a thing is if what? Is if Hashem told us. Hashem told us what Haman was thinking. So therefore, Vayomer Haman Bilibo, Haman said in his heart, is an indication that the Megillah was taught to us by Hashem, divinely inspired. Okay. Rabbi Akiva comes along and he says, I'll give you a different proof. The pasuk says that Esther found favor in the eyes of anyone who met her. Everyone tried to claim that Esther was their girl, from their nation. Right? We know Esther concealed her nationality, and everyone wanted to take credit for Esther. So again, how do I know what everyone was thinking? How do I know that each of the nations of the world wanted to take credit for Esther? It must be that Megillah's Esther is written with Ruach HaKodesh. Or how about Vayivadav Davar LaMordechai? The matter became known to Mordechai. Again, how do we know? How do we know what Mordechai knew? Or how about the fact that after the Jews won that unbelievable military victory, Uvaviza lo shalchu yadam, not a single Jew took from the spoils of war. How do you know? How do you know that there wasn't one Jew who reached into the pocket of some Amaleki and stole his wallet? How do you know? How can we testify to such a thing? The only way we could say any of these things is if the Megillah was divinely inspired. Okay, a variety of opinions how we know the Megillah was written with Ruach HaKodesh. Comes along Shmuel, 3 lines from the end of source 6, and Shmuel says, if I would have been there, I would have given the best answer of all. I would have given the knockout punch, the greatest proof that Megillah's Esther was written by Hashem, was taught to us by Hashem. What proof would I have brought? He says, because the pasuk says, Kimu v'kiblu. They upheld and they accepted. So, says Shmuel, Kimu lamala mashakiblu lamata. Kimu lamala, it was accepted on high, mashakiblu lamata, what they accepted down below. Shmuel says that's the greatest proof of all. And says Rava, I could ask a question on all the other approaches, but Shmuel, glot kosher. No questions on Shmuel. Kimu v'kiblu, kimu lamala, Hashem said this is a beautiful work, mashakiblu lamata. What they were writing down below, Hashem was signing off on. Says Rava, I could ask a question on all the other approaches. For example, Vayomer Haman Bilibo. Haman said something in his heart. How do I know what Haman was thinking? Because throughout the Megillah we see how Haman's acting. Right? It could be we're suggesting it's obvious what Haman was thinking at that point. Esther was a beautiful woman. She was the pride and joy of the kingdom. Of course everyone wanted to take credit for Esther. So again, I could try to disprove all of the other attempted proofs, but Kimu v'kiblu, untouchable. Says Rava, it's an untouchable proof that Esther was written with Ruach HaKodesh. What's so interesting about the fact that Rava, of all people, is saying this is the most beautiful interpretation of the pasuk? Because it was Rava himself who in source number 5 told us a different interpretation of Kimu v'kiblu. How did we learn Kimu v'kiblu in Masechah Shabbos? Kimu mashakiblu kvar. That the Jewish people re-accepted that which they had been forced into at Har Sinai. How are we learning Kimu v'kiblu in Maseches Megillah in source number 6? Megillah Daf Zayin Amud Aleph. Kimu lamala mashakiblu lamata. That in Shemayim Hashem gave them the wisdom to write Megillah Esther down below. So which is it? Which is the true interpretation of the pasuk? And Rava, you of all people, in Maseches Megillah, are espousing the opinion of Kimu lamala mashakiblu lamata. You yourself in Maseches Shabbos told us a different interpretation. What's going on here? This is the world of Gemara that makes you so crazy. And Tosfos in source number 7 says, how do you learn two things from one pasuk? So look at the sweetness of the Gemara. Look at a person who's in love with Hashem and is willing to work hard, you find unbelievable things. It's interesting. Rav Avram Shor, one of the contemporary great minds in Brooklyn, writes many, many svarim. So Rav Avram Shor writes in one of his svarim that the gematria of the word amelus, the numerical value of the word amelus, is the same gematria as the word matok. Because if you're willing to work hard, you'll see something very sweet. The Vilna Gaon was willing to work hard, and the Vilna Gaon showed us something very, very sweet. A little present, a little early Shalach Manos this year for Purim. Look what he says here. Purim Katan. This is my present to you. I hope you enjoy. If you don't like it, you can give it back. And I'll give you like a pineapple and a little thing of grape juice or something. Okay? Says the Vilna Gaon. How do you learn two things from one pasuk? So the Vilna Gaon says an amazing thing. If I were to open up a Megillas Esther right now, what would I find? If I looked inside to see those words, Kimu v'kiblu, what would it look like? It would look like a Kri and a Ksiv. What does it mean, a Kri and a Ksiv? It means if I unrolled the Megillah right now, I would see the words in front of me, Kimu v'kibel. How do I hear it every time I go to shul on Purim? Kimu v'kiblu. It's written one way, it's written v'kibel, and it's enunciated, it's pronounced v'kiblu. So says the Vilna Gaon, how could it be that I learned two things from a single pasuk, from a single phrase? Which is it? Says the Vilna Gaon, well, there's a Kri and there's a Ksiv. The Gemara in Maseches Shabbos is expounding the way that it's written. So when the Gemara in Maseches Shabbos says, Kimu masha kiblu kvar, it's explaining it the way it's written. Kimu masha kibel kvar. Right? That's how it's written. Kimu v'kibel. Who was Makabel it originally, in singular? Who was the one person who was on top of the mountain, so to speak, when everyone else was under the mountain? Moshe Rabbeinu. So Kimu masha kibel means that the Jewish people re-accepted on Purim what the individual Moshe Rabbeinu had accepted at Har Sinai. He was the only one who wasn't forced into it. What about in Maseches Megillah? Kimu lamala masha kiblu lamata. Says the Vilna Gaon, that's following the way that the words are actually pronounced. Kimu v'kiblu. Okay, beautiful. So he shows us how we can extract two things from one pasuk. But the Vilna Gaon is not done yet. Because take a look. Look, only the Vilna Gaon. Only a mind and a heart like the Vilna Gaon could catch such a thing. Look what I underlined it for you in source 5 and 6. What does the Gemara say in Maseches Shabbos when it quotes the pasuk? Dichsiv kimu v'kiblu. What does it say in Maseches Megillah when it quotes the same pasuk? Shene'emar kimu v'kiblu. You hear? In Maseches Shabbos, dichsiv, the Gemara is expounding it the way that it's ksiv, the way that it's written. And in Maseches Megillah, Shene'emar, it's expounding the pasuk the way that it's pronounced. Unbelievable. To be able to pick up on such a nuance, to catch such a thing, is really an unbelievable insight. And again, that's the sweetness that comes for the person who's willing to work hard and to try to crack one's head on some of the intricacies of Gemara. Okay, but now back to our topic. So the Jewish people had an amazing excuse. It lasted until Purim. Purim came, and that was it. No more excuses. The Jews fell in love with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, and the Jewish people accepted the Torah willingly. And that's what Al Derech Avoda, the way that the Svarim talk, the way Sefer Chassidus speak, Al Derech Avoda, to be able to apply something to our life, that's really what I want to focus on for the remainder of our shiur. What does it mean? What does it mean to accept the Torah willingly? Not by force. Not to do mitzvahs because I feel that I have to, but to do mitzvahs because I really, really want to. And I find pleasure in it. And I see it as an opportunity, not only a responsibility, it's also a responsibility, but I see it as a privilege, as an opportunity, as a gift that Hashem has given me, the opportunity to practice His Torah and mitzvahs. So I want to share with you my own insight into a pasuk in Megillas Esther. It's an interpretation that I came to based on something I saw from a great tzaddik named Tzvi Weinberg, Zecher Tzaddik Kadosh Levracha. So let me show you how he reads the pasuk, and then I'll show you, based on his yisod, based on his foundation, I'd like to suggest the following. Okay, in source number 9. Vashesiya kedas ein ones. Let's go back to the beginning of Megillas Esther. Achashverosh is having an amazing party. And the drinking at the party is kadat, is in accordance with the law. Ein ones. No one is being pressured to drink. There's no pressure. You could drink if you'd like to drink. If you don't want to drink, you don't have to drink. Ki kein yisad hamelech al kol rav beso. That was the rule. There was an abundance of pleasures at Achashverosh's party, but no one was pressured. There was no coercion. You could drink what you desired. La'asos the king set up the rules, la'asos kiratzon ish v'ish, to do in accordance with the will of each and every person. No one was pressured, in accordance with your ratzon. And the Gemara has many interpretations. A person was offered wine in accordance with their age. So if you were 40 years old, they brought out a 40-year-old bottle of wine. If you were 50 years old, a 50-year-old bottle of wine. Right? There was all the delicacies in the world. But v'ashtia kadas ein ones. No one was forced. You didn't have to drink if you don't want to drink. There was no peer pressure to drink. Okay. Says R Tzvi Weinberg, a very deep Hasidic interpretation of this pasuk. He says, what else could shasiya mean besides drinking? Where else do we recognize that word from? So he brings us to a Mishnah in Maseches Yoma. In Maseches Yoma, we know that during the Second Temple period, when the Kohen Gadol would go into the Kodesh Kadashim, walk into the Holy of Holies, in the good old days, during Bayis Rishon, when he would walk in to perform the Avodah on Yom Kippur, there was an Aron. The Aron was there. The Aron Kodesh was there, with the Luchos, with the Sefer Torah. Unfortunately, during Bayis Sheni, the Aron wasn't found there. Either Nebuchadnezzar had taken it into captivity when he conquered, when he destroyed the first Beis HaMikdash, or the king Yoshiyahu had hidden it away. But the bottom line is how depressing. He'd walk into the Kodesh Kadashim and the room was empty. So when he would come in to sprinkle the blood, what was he sprinkling towards? What was he sprinkling on? There was no Aron. There was no Aron in the Kodesh Kadashim. Says the Mishnah on Maseches Yoma in source number 10, Mishanita la'Aron, once the Aron had been removed, the Aron had been taken, Even haisa sham. There was a rock. There was a rock in the Kodesh Kadashim. That rock was there, miyamos neviim rishonim. It had been discovered. Truthfully, it had been there long before Nevi'im Rishonim, but it had been recognized and discovered during the period of the Nevi'im Rishonim. V'shasiya haisa nikris. And it was called the Even Shasiya. What does Even Shasiya mean? Where today, the Dome of the Rock stands. Right? That rock, that Dome of the Rock, where unfortunately it's no longer in our hands, right? But that rock, the Even Shasiya, is translated as the foundation stone. Because Chazal say, Misham hushsas ha'olam. That's where Hashem founded the world. When Hashem was creating the world, where did it begin? Where did Hashem first, so to speak, place His presence down in this world, and then build the whole world around it? It was that Even Shasiya, the foundation stone. So says Tzvi Weinberg, Shasiya could mean to drink, but Shasiya could also mean the foundation. So now let's go back to the pasuk, and I'll show you a very, very deep Hasidic interpretation of the pasuk. V'ashtia kadas ein ones. Look how he interprets it. V'ashtia kadas, the foundation. He's using the word shasiya as now the Even Shasiya. The foundation of dat, the foundation of religious life, the foundation of the religious experience is ein ones. So let me tell you what Tzvi Weinberg says. It says the following. To know one more word in Hasidic terminology. What's the concept of ein or ayin? Nothingness, bittul, complete self-negation. Hashtia kadas, the foundation of having a healthy relationship with Hashem, is that ein, one's self-negation, has to be onus, has to be forced. It's very hard, as human beings, it's very hard to crack, to break our ego. It's very easy when we work hard, and a person is doing well financially, a person is doing well spiritually, a person is having any type of success in this world, it's very easy to say, Kochi v'otzim yadi, was my strength. And you pat yourself on the back, and you take credit for it. And you feel that I worked hard, I deserve the credit. Vashtia kadas, if you want to have a real relationship with Hashem, it's going to be hard, but ein, be humble and onus, and force yourself to be humble. It's not so easy to do. But challenge yourself, force yourself to be humble, and to give Hashem the credit for really everything that happens in your life. That's what Tzvi Weinberg says. But I think I can imagine that many of you understand where I'm going with this, and I'd like to offer a different interpretation. Vashtia kedas, the foundation of a religious experience is ein onas, is that I serve Hashem not because I'm forced to serve Hashem, but because I want to serve Hashem. And it fits so beautifully with the end of the pasuk. How does the pasuk end? That kikein yisad hamelech. This is what the king decreed. Who's the king in Megillas Esther? The Medrash says whenever it says the king, without mentioning Achashverosh's name, it's talking about the king. Vashtia kadas, the foundation of a healthy and authentic religious experience, is ein onas. That Hashem doesn't have to twist my arm to get me to do Torah and mitzvos. Kikein yisad hamelech, because that's how Hashem wants the relationship. That's what the melech malchei amlachim. That's how Hashem wants the relationship to be. I'll call Rav Beisel, that's how he established it for all people. La'asos, what's the end of the pasuk? Kiratzon ish v'ish. Kiratzon ish v'ish. in accordance with the will of each person. That Torah and mitzvahs is something that we desire. That it's not something Hashem has to force us into. It's not something we should have to force ourselves to do. But it should be something we're so excited to do, so enthusiastic to do, that I want to do it on my own. That I'm longing for it. I'm not doing it just out of a sense of responsibility, which is also true. It is a sense of responsibility. But to get past that more immature relationship with Hashem, and to have a deeper connection to Hashem, that I feel privileged to be a Jew. I feel honored to be a Jew. I feel thankful that I have all of these opportunities to serve you in so many ways. Who takes away that joy? Who tries to make Judaism a burden for us? Of course, if Purim is the time when we're accepting this degree of simcha, of excitement to be a Jew, then of course the enemy of Purim is the one who takes it away from us. Who's the enemy of Purim? It's Haman, and Haman comes from who? Amalek. Amalek comes whenever the Jewish people are developing an authentic kesher, an authentic relationship, connection to Hashem. Amalek comes and tries to squash it, tries to destroy the simchas achayim that a Jew has, the joy, the authentic joy of being a Jewish person. Says the pasuk in source number 11. Vayis'u kol adas b'nei Yisrael mimidbar sin l'masa'ayim al pi Hashem vayachanu b'refidim. The Jews encamped in a place called Refidim. Says pasuk 12, source number 12, pasuk in B'Shalach, a couple lines later, a couple psukim later, vayavo Amalek vayilachem im Yisrael b'Refidim. The Jews came to a place called Refidim, and lo and behold, who shows up in Refidim? None other than our arch nemesis Amalek. What's Refidim? Why was Refidim called Refidim? So the Gemara has two interpretations. The first one happens to be, I find, very, very interesting. The Gemara in Sanhedrin, in source 13, says, "My lashon Refidim." Why was that place called Refidim? Ready for this? For those of you who are very practical people, you'll like this answer a lot. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Refidim Shema. Why was it called Refidim? Because Refidim was its name. Okay, thank you very much, Rabbi Eliezer. Right? Why is it called Refidim? Because the sign, when you got off on the exit, said Refidim. That was what it was called. Don't read into it so much. Okay, good. Says Rabbi Yeshua, I'll go one step deeper. Refidim means something. Refidim tells me about the nature of that place. And when I understand the nature of that place, I'll understand how it was that Amalek was able to attack. How did Amalek get the upper hand in Refidim? Says Rabbi Yeshua, where it's bolded in source 13. Rabbi Yeshua Omer, Sherifu Atzman Midivrei Torah. That there was a weakening, that there was a loss of connection to Divrei Torah. Or as Rashi brings it, as often people refer to this Maimer Chazal, Sherafu Yadeya Min HaTorah. Sherifu Atzman Midivrei Torah. What's the Pashup Shad? The Jews weren't learning as well as they should be. They weren't as connected as well as they should be. But it's deeper than that. It's much worse than that. When Amalek comes to town, Sherafu Yadeya Min HaTorah, or in the language of the Gemara, Sherifu Atzman Midivrei Torah. I once heard a beautiful interpretation. That their hands felt weak, Min HaTorah, Midivrei Torah. That they felt the Torah was a burden. It's not that they weren't as connected to Torah. They were doing Torah and mitzvahs. But they felt burdened by it. They felt heavy from it. They didn't feel privileged by it. They felt that Hashem was punishing them by giving them the Torah. And therefore we have to remind ourselves, we have to always go back to that first encounter we had with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. If we want to go back, Yisad Amalek, like it's saying in Megillas Esther. What's the foundation of the relationship? What was it supposed to be? Just go back and listen in to the way that Hashem spoke to the Jewish people. The very, very first time Hashem spoke. The very first time Hashem waited all those years to introduce Himself. And what did He say? What was His opening sentence? How did Hashem introduce Himself to the world? Anochi Hashem Elokecha. I am Hashem your God. So immediately the Jewish people panicked. Oh, you're going to try to control us? You're going to place all these demands upon us? Says Hashem, oh, slow down. What does it mean to be your God? Why do I want to be your God? Anochi Hashem Elokecha in source 14. Asher otzeisicha me'eretz Mitzrayim mibeis avadim. I am Hashem your God, and I took you what? I took you out of captivity. I freed you from the house of slavery. The Or Chaim HaKadosh says, not only did I free you physically, but I freed you mentally. I allowed you to leave that slave mentality behind. You know how hard it is for a person who's coming out of jail, who's coming out of captivity, to transition back to regular life? And Hashem set them free. They were spiritually okay. The emotional trauma didn't stop them from functioning when they left Mitzrayim. So Hashem says, hold on a second. I freed you physically, I freed you emotionally, mentally, right? And I'm asking you, and I'm introducing myself as your God. So let's ask ourselves a very simple question. If someone is wallowing in a dungeon for 210 years, If someone is being held a slave and being forced to work back-breaking labor for 210 years, and someone comes and saves them, if I were to ask you one of two possibilities, is the person saving them A, someone who loves them and frees them from that captivity because he loves them, or B, is the person freeing them because he hates them? So I think we would all very obviously respond that the one who is freeing that person from captivity after such a long, difficult period of time clearly loves them. If the person hated them, he would have left them in captivity, let them suffer. So Hashem says to Klal Yisrael, Anochi Hashem Elokecha. I am Hashem your God. And I'm going to ask a lot of things of you. But I don't want you ever to forget why I took you out of Mitzrayim. I took you out of Mitzrayim very simply because I love you. So guess what? Everything else, everything else I'm about to say, keep kashrus, but it's expensive, but I'm giving it to you because I love you. Keep Shabbos, but it's so restrictive, I'm giving it to you because I love you. Keep Taharas Mishpacha, put on tefillin, daven, give tzedakah. Hashem says all the details of Allah, I'm giving it to you simply because it's a continuation of Anochi Hashem Elokecha. This is the interpretation of Rabbeinu Yonah. One of the great Rishonim, Rabbeinu Yonah says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am Hashem your God. And if you want to know what that means, if you want to know what my motivation in becoming your God is, it's the exact same motivation of Asher Otzei Sichem Eretz Mitzrayim. I took you out of Mitzrayim because I love you, and I'm giving you all of the mitzvos asay and mitzvos lo asay simply because I love you. And when a Jew stops and he thinks about that, it's a different relationship. It's not a punishment. It's not a burden. It's not hard to get up in the morning and to face the responsibilities that a Jew has to himself or to herself in this world. And I'd like to explain, based on this comment of Rabbeinu Yonah, something we say every single day in Shema. What do we say in Shema as we accept upon ourselves the responsibility to serve Hashem? V'haya im shamoa tishmu el mitzvosai asher anochi mitzaveh eschem hayom la'avas Hashem Elokeichem u'la'avdo b'chol levavchem b'chol nafshechem. V'haya. The Medrash says that any time you see the word v'haya, it's a magic word. V'haya means a lashon of simcha, something very joyous. V'yihi b'mei, the way Megillas Esther begins, v'yihi b'mei is always something treacherous, something bad. V'yihi could go either way. V'haya, says the Medrash, is a lashon of simcha. So look at this pasuk, it's so beautiful. V'haya, it'll be a tremendous joy, it'll be a tremendous simcha for you. Im shamoa tishmu mitzvosai, if you listen to my mitzvos. But how do you listen to my mitzvos? Do you listen to them as God being some evil taskmaster trying to control you? Or do you listen asher anochi mitzaveh eschem hayom? Do you listen back into the voice of Anochi Hashem Elokecha? Asher teisichem eretz Mitzrayim b'beis avadim. Do you hear the voice of Hashem who says, I gave you mitzvos because I loved you and I freed you? And if you hear Anochi, if you could tap into that, if you could understand why Hashem is giving you mitzvos, then v'hayir, there's going to be a tremendous simcha in your life. And you'll be able to serve Hashem, as the pasuk includes, la'avas Hashem Elokeichem. You won't spend your whole life serving God out of fear. You'll serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu out of love. Because you recognize that every single thing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave you is because He loves you. Now, Moshe Feinstein used to say, an entire generation of Jews was lost. Because in the early years in America, when it wasn't so easy to be a Jew, when there was what to complain about, Baruch Hashem, I think we have it a lot easier today. I think we could all recognize that. But in the early days, in the 1920s, the 1930s, what it meant to be a religious person in America meant losing your job every single week. That you were looking, you told your boss you're not coming in Saturday, your boss said look for a new job. And from week to week, there were people literally from week to week, with Mesiras Nefesh, they kept Torah and mitzvos. But they carried it around like a heavy burden. And they would often, R Moshe Feinstein said, they would say to their children, "Oy, it's so schwer to be a Yid. It's so broken, it's so heavy, it's so difficult to be a Jew." And the truth is, it's true. A Jew is losing his job every week. That is difficult to be a Jew. But what didn't they tell their children? They didn't finish the sentence. It is sometimes hard to be a Jew. It is a big commitment to be a Jew. It is costly to be a Jew. It is demanding of our time and resources to be a Jew. But they didn't finish the sentence. Yes, sometimes it's schwer to be a Jew. It's hard to be a Jew. It's difficult to be a Jew. But it's so worth it to be a Jew. It's so worth it. And for all the struggles, for all the challenges, for all the money that we have to invest and the time and all the things we have to give up in this world in order to be a Jew. But it's so worth it. And we're so fortunate that Hashem gave us that opportunity. Remember, I once read a story. A little kid went to school, goes to yeshiva, goes to school. And it's an Erev Shabbos. Right? So the Morah says, okay, we're going to have a Shabbos Abba. Right? The kid comes in dressed in his Shabbos clothes, very cute, and he gets to make Kiddush for the class. So the kid comes, he picks up the Kiddush cup, and he starts to recite Kiddush, and he goes, Oy, Yom HaShishi. So the Moshe says, what's the Oy? Where'd you get that Oy? So he says, my father. He says, I got it from my father. He says, every week my father comes home after a long week of work. He says, Oy, Yom HaShishi. There's so many emails that have to still be checked. There's so many clients. And so the kid picked that up. Oy, Yom HaShishi. Right? Oy, I have to shut off my cell phone to keep Shabbos. Rahman al-Islam. Such a terrible tragedy. But unfortunately, if we're not living a life of inspired Torah and mitzvos, if we're not living a life where we're filled with simcha over the opportunity to be a Jew, then God forbid, that's what we pass on to our children. That's what we pass on to our community. That's what we pass on to Klal Yisrael. A Klal Yisrael who feels burdened, still standing under that mountain, Kafalei Marki Gigas, where Hashem's threatening us, take my Torah or else. It's true, Torah is a big responsibility. The Baal Shem Tov of all people, the founder of Chassidus, the Baal Shem Tov of all people, was the one who said that Kafalei Marki Gigas was necessary because there's going to be moments when you're not inspired. That right now, Nasiv and Nishma, we're so excited. The Baal Shem Tov, who was filled with excitement and joy for Yiddishkeit, said there are going to be mornings where you need to force yourself, where you need to put a mountain over your head to get yourself up and to do it. But that's not the way it's supposed to be. That's not the ideal relationship with Hashem. The ideal relationship with Hashem is V'hashasiya Kadas, the foundation of the relationship. What the relationship is really supposed to be, Ein Ones. I don't need to be forced. I don't need to be coerced. I see it as a beautiful, beautiful opportunity to live the life of a Jew who's observant of Torah and mitzvahs. The Vilna Gaon said that there were 3 mashalim that the Dubna Maggid, the famous Dubna Maggid of Yaakov Krantz, the great Maggid of Dubna, known for his amazing parables. The Vilna Gaon said there were 3 mashalim of the Dubna Maggid where he explained with his parable exactly what the pasuk's truest intent was. And I want to share one of them with you. The Kotzker Rebbe said about those same 3 mashalim, they must have been said with Ruach HaKodesh. Because the mashal so precisely captures the feeling of the pasuk, of the word of the Navi who's trying to express something. Says the Dubna Maggid the following mashal. The pasuk is a pasuk in Yeshaya. I want to jump to source 19. The pasuk is a pasuk in Yeshaya. The pasuk says, "V'lo osi karasa Yaakov ki agata bi Yisrael." Before I even translate the pasuk, let's learn the mashal of the Dubna Maggid. The Shem Shmuel, the Rebbe of Sakachov, in his writings on Vayikra, in source 20, he brings this mashal. This is the only place in the Sefer where he quotes the Dubna Maggid. He brings this mashal, and again, the Vilna Gaon said about this mashal, this is exactly what Yeshaya Navi was trying to express to Klal Yisrael in expressing this pasuk in Parak Mem Gimel in Yeshaya. So here's the mashal. Says the Maggid of Dubna, source 20. Peirish al pi mashal l'socher shaba min haderech. Imagine a fellow, he's been traveling by boat. He's got a large suitcase with him, and he arrives, he comes from the road, right? He comes to the port, let's imagine, and he gets off the boat, or he steps off a train. V'chavilaso ito. And he has his bag with him. He's holding his bag. And he says to the fellow, there's a young man who's standing there, looking for a little business, and this fellow turns to him, and he turns to him, and he says, would it be possible for you to carry my bag back to the house? You know, I've been traveling for so long, I'm a little worn out. He asks him, would it be okay for you to take the bag to my house? I know you charge, and I'm happy to pay. And he asks him what his fee is, and he says, I charge by the pound, I charge by the distance, no problem, I'm happy to pay you. And they come back to the house. The fellow walks ahead, and this guy's coming behind, he's schlepping the suitcase. He gets back to the house, he gives him the bill, and he sees it's an exorbitant amount. So he says, I don't understand. You told me what your rate was. You told me you charge by the pound. Why is the bill so expensive? He says, what do you mean, why am I charging you so much? Look at me. I'm so worn out from carrying your bag. I'm schwitzing from head to toe. I'm soaked. I'm done for the day. That was the heaviest bag I ever carried in my life. And the homeowner turns to him. He says, there's been a terrible mistake. If you look that worn out, and if this is my bill at the end of the day, then I'm telling you, without even opening the contents of this bag, I can promise you that's not my bag. That's not my bag. I know my bag. What was in my bag, he says, is something that's what? He says it's Nikia Vikala. It was light. It was clean. I don't know what you were schlepping. You were schlepping someone's gym bag filled with heavy weights or something. But I can assure you, if you're that burnt out from carrying my bag, then you don't have the right bag. That's not my bag. Says the Maggid, that's exactly what the Navi Yeshaya was saying to Klal Yisrael. This is exactly what Yeshaya was saying on behalf of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Klal Yisrael. Go back to the pasuk in source 19. V'lo osi karasa Yaakov ki yagata bi Yisrael. If you got to be Yisrael, Jewish people, if you're so worn out from being a Jew, then lo osi karasa Yaakov. Hashem says, that's not my bag. That's not my Yiddishkeit. That's not my Judaism. That's not what Torah and mitzvahs is supposed to be. Yes, of course it's hard work preparing for Pesach. Of course it's hard work scrubbing the floor. But if you can't do it with some degree of a simchas hachayim, if you're burdened, if you feel tied down by your tefillin in the morning, Hashem says, that's not tefillin. That's not my intention in tefillin. That's not what my Torah looks like. That's not my bag of Torah and mitzvahs. And therefore, only a Jew who at the end of the day has worked hard and has put a lot of energy into Torah and mitzvahs, but feels not burdened by it and not broken by it, but feels energized by it, that's the person who really has a HaKadosh Baruch Hu's bag of Torah and mitzvahs. And my daughter, I have a 4-year-old daughter. Baruch Hashem, we're blessed with 4 children. So my wife and I, we have a 4-year-old daughter, Meira Rivka, and some of the chaver here knows. And she's very cute, and she likes to prance around the house, and she has this little princess crown that she likes to wear all the time. And it's beautiful, every Jewish girl is a bas melech, a princess of the Ribono Shel Olam. So one of her big sisters said to her the other day, Meira, isn't it annoying for you to always wear that crown? Doesn't that bother you? Isn't it heavy? Isn't it awkward? I remember once read a mashal, someone said, imagine a prince when he first becomes the king. Right? And he has to wear the heavy robes of the king, and he has to wear the crown. And even before he's the prince, he looks at his father sitting there with the crown on his head. Isn't that burdensome for you? Isn't that uncomfortable to wear that heavy crown with those heavy jewels? And the king understands that the privilege of wearing the crown makes it all worth it. He doesn't even realize that it's a burden. So little Meira says to her big sisters, no, I wear it all the time, I'm used to it. Right? She's excited about it. It's annoying if you're not used to it, if you're not natural with it. But when it's a natural fit, when Torah and mitzvahs becomes a natural fit, it's not burdensome, it's not heavy, it's not uncomfortable. It's something that we're proud to wear all the time, and we walk around with it, and we feel that it carries us, not that we have to carry it. I remember Rav Freifeld, I once read, Rav Shlomo Freifeld, the founder of Shayashiv, had in his office, he had a picture, or maybe he had an actual key on the wall, a little black key that he had. Imagine this was his desk, he sat in this chair, and he would meet with students, and on the opposite wall, he had in a frame either a picture of a black key or an actual black key that was framed. And Rav Freifeld used to explain that when he sits in his office and he's meeting with young men, and he's talking to them about all their struggles, all their difficulties, right? He looks at that key and he reminds himself that there's always a key to unlock a Jewish heart. That was a reminder to himself that there has to be a way to solve this problem, no matter how difficult it seems, that there's a way to unlock the Jewish neshama. So I remember I read that story a number of years ago, and I was very, very inspired by it. And I must have mentioned it to my wife, and she mentioned it to her mother, to my mother-in-law. And next thing you know, my mother-in-law was out shopping, and all of a sudden she comes back with this huge black wooden key. New generations like bigger problems, you need bigger keys to unlock bigger problems. So I have my office in YU, I have this huge black key. And I had it on the wall, and it fell off, and it broke a little bit. So it was sitting on my desk. And one day a student walks into my office, and he sees this huge black key on the desk, and he picks up the key, and he said, "Whoa, Rebbe, this key's a lot lighter than I thought it was." And I said, "Exactly. This key's a lot lighter than he thought it was." Looked like this big, heavy metal key. It was this light wooden key. Right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you think it's so hard to carry my Torah and mitzvahs? You think it's so impossible to unlock the treasures of Torah and mitzvahs? It's not so hard. It's not so heavy. It's not so impossible. It's very natural. Vashtiya Kadas, the foundation of a religious life, is ein onus. It's really not that hard. And the simcha of others, the recognition that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is giving us the opportunity not only to be forced into Torah, but to choose Torah. And I'll end with the final source. A beautiful remez that I once saw in a sefer. If you look at the name Esther, Megillas Esther, the heroine, the one who taught us this lesson, it describes the letters of her name, Esther, are Rashi Tevo, spell out the first letters, Tchilaso Ones, Visofo Ratzon. Tchilaso Ones, Sofo Ratzon is actually the story of Esther, and it's a very tragic story. That Tchilaso Ones, at first she was forced to go to Achashverosh, but in the end, she went on her own before the king. She entered Achashverosh without being forced to come to Achashverosh. On the realm of Pshat, that was a very sad moment in Jewish history, when Esther had to submit herself willingly before Achashverosh and all of the repercussions in her personal life. But in Pnimius Torah on a deeper level, Esther being Klal Yisrael, Tchilaso Ones, at first Esther was forced to come before the Melech. But at the end of the day, the salvation of the Jewish people came when Esther went willingly before the king. When she came willingly before HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When the Jewish people, despite the Esther, despite the Hester Panim, despite the lack of clarity of Hashem's presence in our world, but to be able to say, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I still choose you, and I come before you willingly. That's the Simcha of Purim. And that's what it means to really be a Jew. So Mir Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should help us as we fight off this enemy of Amalek. This Amalek who wants Rafu Yadeya Min HaTorah. They want that the Torah itself should be that heavy bag. Says Yeshaya Navi, V'lo osi karasa Yaakov. You've never spoken to me. If you think Torah mitzvahs are a burden, then you've never spoken to me. That's not who I am, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'm here, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Asher Tzeicham Eretz Mitzrayim Beis Avadim. The same way I took you out of captivity after 210 years because I love you, every other detail of our relationship is an expression of my love. And Amir Hashem, we should be able to come to Purim, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu should be able to look at us. And Kimu V'Kibla, the Jewish people should once again accept the Torah out of tremendous, tremendous love for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And in that way, we'll deepen our relationship with Hashem, bring tremendous nachas ruach to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and be zocher to the Gula Shleim Meher B'Yameinu. Amen. Thank you all for coming.
All right, everybody.